On Tuesday, I was woken up by the sound of battleships firing onto the coastal area. So very large booms followed by echoes. That's something that I've not experienced before. Driving around every so often, you see the smoke rising from airstrikes further inland, and the constant sound of drones overhead was genuinely terrifying. Not something that I've experienced either. And the people in Palestine, in Gaza, now refer to the drones as mosquitoes because it's just this ever-present buzzing noise. So there is a real sense of ever-present risk and danger.
Starvation, the threat of constant attack, and the news that a as yet unknown date for the invasion of Rafah has been set. The infrastructure of hospitals and homes in ruins, the populace sheltering under the spectre of war. What is it like to work in southeastern Gaza day after day and try and aid the people caught up in the horrors there? Joining me now from Cairo is the International Rescue Committee Vice President for Emergencies, Bob Kitchen. Bob, I gather you've spent 3 days in Rafah with the IRC. What has it been like?
That's correct. So I went in on Monday, came out yesterday. It was both appalling and inspiring. The level of destruction around Rafah up into the middle section of Gaza is amongst the worst I've ever seen. For 25 years I've worked in the world. The level of displacement, more than 1 million people living in Rafah on top of each other, basically in any spare space between houses, open areas, there are now tents. Along the middle reservation of roads, people have set up tents to try and find shelter. And then inspiring to meet with Palestinian aid workers who are working so hard around the clock, facing great danger themselves to help their fellow Palestinians make it through to the end of each day.
And what is the situation like in terms of food? A lot of people are concerned that there might be famine.
Well, the United Nations have said that across Gaza, there's now more than 1 million people who are imminently facing famine, and that definitely rings true to what I saw. Many children, bone thin, really looking unwell. The reports from our doctors on the ground, interestingly, we have one doctor who's just returned after 3 months, and he commented of how much weight Palestinian doctors that he works day in, day out had lost over the last 3 months. So it's not just children and displaced, it's even the middle class of doctors who are losing weight rapidly as there's just not enough food. And whatever food is available is now so expensive that people can't afford it. Just one quick example, not food, but just an example of inflation. 1 liter of petrol now costs $30 in Gaza when it is available, which is not often. So the cost of food is now out of reach for many people. So it's a really desperate situation.
So obviously we saw the tragic death of the 7 AIDS workers from World Central Kitchen. I mean, when you're moving around in that area, how dangerous does it feel?
It feels dangerous. On Tuesday, I was woken up by the sound of battleships firing onto the coastal area. So very large booms followed by echoes. That's something that I've not experienced before. Driving around every so often, you see the smoke rising from airstrikes further inland, and the constant sound of drones overhead was genuinely terrifying. Not something that I've experienced either. And the people in Palestine, in Gaza, now refer to the drones as mosquitoes because it's just this ever-present buzzing noise. So there is a real sense of ever-present risk and danger, but not in a way that will stop the aid effort. We are able to continue working. We're able to continue saving lives and delivering aid. So it's just finding that right balance of risk management.
And how are people coping with the fact that they would expect Israel to enter Rafah at any moment?
You know, I would say there's a real tangible sense of fear in amongst a population that has already been displaced, many of them multiple times. Many of the people in Rafah are from Gaza City in the north that have moved all the way down a number of times. So in addition to feeling exhausted and desperate for food and resources, they now have a great sense of fear of not knowing what's coming. As you said, Israel has announced that they have a date. They've not announced whether they've got a plan yet, which is critical to safeguard the more than 1 million civilians in Rafah. So there's this sense of we don't know what's going to happen next, where we're expected to go, and whether we'll be able to survive. So real fear.
Well, talking about where they might be expected to go, has the border with Egypt, does it remain closed?
Extremely closed. Yeah, Egypt has constructed an additional layer of large concrete barriers. It's the strongest sense of you will not come this way I've ever seen. So that it is not an option to go into Egypt.
And why won't the Egyptians let people go into Egypt to flee, what could be a very serious conflict in their area?
It's a long, complex answer that comes back to they've made the decision that they will not accept Palestinian refugees at this stage, and that Israel, as the duty holder, the occupier, has to afford the human rights, the safety of civilians within this area. So that's what we're really focused on right now. If an invasion does have to go ahead, I really hope it doesn't. I really hope that the world comes to its senses and intervenes and enforces somehow or encourages a ceasefire so we don't have to face this. But if an invasion does go forward, that there will be safe and dignified ways of the civilians to get out the way.
How do you get into Gaza when you go and visit?
It's a long drive from Cairo by road up through the Sinai Peninsula, which is it's an interesting place in itself, and then across the border into Rafah, and then in Gaza, driving around in amongst the mass population who've displaced and have found homes on the side of the road.
And then, and presumably massive bureaucracy in terms of getting a visa to go through that border.
Strangely not. You need permission from the Egyptian authorities to move through Sinai and to exit the country. But the Palestinians, the bureaucracy of getting into Palestine is nothing in comparison. They log you in. They're very welcoming because of the desperate needs in international NGOs like IRC, and our partner MAP UK are welcomed in with open arms, with great sense of collaboration because they know we're there to help them. And then it's difficult. We obviously, to get in, we have to have approval from the Israelis, and then each day we have to have approval or notification from the Israelis as we move, so we can be to some degree assured that they will not strike us as we move. So the bureaucracy is not with the Palestinians, it's with the Israelis.
Well, thank you, Bob Kitchen. That is the International Rescue Committee's Vice President for Emergencies, Bob Kitchen, who's just returned from Rafah and was giving us a sense of what it is like on the ground there.